So the beautiful artistic pulling, the perfectly thin and even noodles, that comes with practice. And that's okay, I can accept that. But what almost everyone, including me, fails at is actually something else entirely. My number one question is this: how the hell do I get a dough that's even elastic enough to be pulled like that? No recipe online works, so there must be some type of secret. Well, today I want to show you that you can pull this off with almost any type of wheat flour, water, salt, and the right technique. And it's an easy one. Let's make some hand-pulled noodles and I'll explain along the way. So first of all, let's talk about flour. Most recipes will call for high gluten flour, which, fair enough, gluten is the stuff that makes hand-pulled noodles stretchy, but people who overly obsess about this are kind of missing the point. For one, high gluten is a relative term, it's just a label. What we should be paying attention to is the actual gluten content. I mean, like an objective number or something. Fortunately, that is really easy to find out. Let me show you. So this is regular German all-purpose flour, and what we're looking for is the protein content, which is our gluten content. Check this out, 12. Interesting. Okay, now let's check out the one right next to it. It's supposed to be a stronger flour. Huh, also 12. So wheat flour will always have a gluten content between like 5, that would be a very light cake flour, and maybe like 15, that would be a very strong bread flour. So considering that, I think 12 is actually already pretty high in gluten. It just doesn't say so on the package. So now let's go and cross-check that with the gluten content of actual Chinese high gluten flour. And I know just the right place where we can find that. Follow me. Okay, where are you? Ah, there we go. Chinese high gluten wheat flour. Ooh, do you see that? 11. That is quite a bit lower than regular German all-purpose flour. So this just confirms my theory. You know, earlier I looked up a special Chinese flour. It's made for hand-pulling noodles, and the gluten content was like 10. A few people online actually claim that you should use cake flour, which is like super low in gluten. So I don't know, man. Conclusion, I'm sure some flours work better than others, but overall, it just doesn't seem like gluten content is that big of a deal. It's not like a make it or break it situation. And just to make a point, for this recipe, I'm gonna use the regular all-purpose flour from the supermarket. Okay, so if it's not the right type of flour, then what exactly is the secret to a super stretchy dough? I found these videos that show the entire process from start to finish. It only takes about 15 minutes for a pro. And aside from flour and water, there are 2 more ingredients. There is salt, usually added into the water, and according to the master in this video, it prevents some unwanted fermentation processes, especially on a hot summer day. And then there is penghui. And this is where things get really interesting. Penghui is an alkaline substance, and that means it increases the pH value of things. Penghui was originally made from a northern Chinese tumbleweed, which is first dried and burned, and then the ashes are compressed into these rocks. In the olden days, people would boil these rocks for a really, really long time to extract the substance that could get them this alkaline water. Today things are much easier, and you can just buy this blue bag with industrially produced instant penghui, which you can just dissolve in water. So this is the stuff that all the proper ramen places in China will actually use for making pulled noodles. But because this powder, this penghui powder, is virtually unavailable outside of China, a lot of people who fail at making hand-pulled noodles say that this must be the one secret ingredient that is missing in order for them to become a ramen master overnight. But it's not. Penghui might be a bit special, but first and foremost, it is simply an alkali. There are a bunch of things you can use instead. There's baking soda, or ideally baked baking soda. Then there is potash, which is actually quite common in Germany, or kansui, or jianshui, which is the best substitute for penghui, I think, but also super hard to find. I actually had to get this bottle from San Francisco, which just has a really, really big Chinatown. But before you go crazy over trying to find all these freak show alkalis, let me clarify one thing. I really wanted to know why exactly you needed salt and an alkali. And as I was doing some obsessively deep research on this topic, I actually stumbled upon this very helpful scientific study. Check this out. Study of the quality characteristics of fresh noodles with regular salt and alkali. And then look at that. The results showed that alkali induced significantly increased gluten strength and noodle hardness, while salt resulted in superior dough extensibility. Dough extensibility. Now that's what I'm talking about. So according to this study, the alkali mostly serves the texture of the noodle, the chewiness, the bite that's so typical for Lanzhou Lamian, the noodles we're trying to create here. But what helps create the stretchiness of the dough is not the penghui at all, it's the salt. Can this be true? I'm gonna put this to the test in a second, but there is one last thing we need to look at before we do that, which is the actual key to making that elastic hand-pulled noodle dough, which is technique. You do not just mix all the ingredients together and that's it. No. There is a whole series of very particular special moves involved in getting the dough just right. There's a lot of tearing, there's pressing, special kneading with your knuckles and this and that and all sorts of other dough abuse. This kneading technique that the noodle masters from Lanzhou perform, I think it's just the most efficient way to get the gluten in your dough to this extremely developed, if not overdeveloped state. The next step is a continuous pulling and twisting of this dough. You might have seen this before, it looks really cool. This goes on for quite a while, and what this does, and this is key, is it aligns the gluten strands into the same direction, creating a support system, which is the actual #1 thing helping you to get an elastic dough. But if this is the secret to making hand-pulled noodles, does that mean we all have to go to Lanzhou now, enter noodle school to learn how to knead dough like a maniac? No. Most restaurants in China use machines these days. That allows them to basically jump straight to the pull and twist phase. Problem is you need a really heavy-duty dough processor to do this, and even then, it's such a pain to clean this thing. Trust me, I've tried. We're gonna do something much easier. We're gonna do nothing. Let's see if you paid attention. So in part 1 of this series, we made biang-biang-mian by pulling slices of dough into individual noodles. What allowed us to do that is a process called autolyse, which is pretty much just a fancy word that means letting your dough rest while the gluten in your dough slowly but steadily forms crosslinks all by itself. Plus, some enzymes do a little bit of magic as well. My plan is to give the dough a super long overnight autolyse and then see how far we get the next day. So, the recipe part of this video is indeed quite short. Here is a kilogram of flour. To this I am adding 1% of its weight in salt and then 50% of its weight in water. I'll roughly combine everything just enough until I get one cohesive ball, which I am then covering with some plastic foil so it can rest overnight undisturbed. Autolyse. The next day, check this out. You can literally see how well the gluten has bonded. So I cut off part of my dough for easier handling, then I jumped straight into the process of aligning our very well developed gluten strands. In the beginning, the dough would tear and break a lot, which if you think about it makes sense actually, but it literally took like less than 5 minutes of pulling, folding and twisting until the dough was smooth and very easy to pull. A very good start indeed. So I tried again, but this time I added the alkaline kansui. And to be precise, I added 1% of the original amount of flour of this ball of dough, and that was 3.5 grams. Then I worked it in and started pulling again. And you know what? I did actually feel that the pulling got a little bit easier with the kansui, but as you saw, it works just fine without it. After a few minutes, you're hopefully gonna feel that your dough becomes really easy to stretch, and at this point you can generously dust it with some flour. That will prevent your noodles from sticking to each other. Then you can cut the dough into workable pieces, cover and rest it for a few minutes, and after that, prepare some boiling water and you can actually begin to pull some noodles. For now, my technique is not great at all. I'm not even close to teaching you guys how to do this. The noodles I'm pulling aren't very pretty yet, and I guess they could be thinner too. But the texture, you guys, it's already there. The noodles are chewy and they have this nice elastic bounce to them. But hey, my goal for today was to get us to the point where we can start practicing with an actually stretchy dough. and I think we succeeded. I'm gonna keep practicing pulling the noodles until I can get them beautifully slick, and even then, there is still that Lanzhou style beef broth that is so essential for this dish. So that's all coming in the future. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.
This video was brought to you by Andong's epic Patreon supporters. Don't forget to subscribe and smash the bell for weekly food inspiration from all over the world.